The amber glow of the bar was a sepia film over the restless Friday crowd. It was the kind of place where laughter was a little too loud, and glances held a beat too long, a sanctuary for the happily committed and the discreetly seeking. Sarah Henderson sat at the sleek marble bar, her fingers tracing the condensation on her glass of Pinot Grigio. At 34, with her chestnut hair in a tidy, professional bob and wearing a simple emerald green dress that felt both elegant and like a costume, she was the picture of composed suburban life. And she was deeply, profoundly bored. Across town, her husband of 11 years, Mark, was likely already asleep, his reading glasses slipping down his nose, a biography of some forgotten president open on his chest. Their love was a comfortable, well-worn sweater, warm, familiar, and slightly frayed at the cuffs. It was built on shared mortgages, parent-teacher conferences for their 7-year-old daughter, Chloe, and a mutual, unspoken agreement to avoid discussing the quiet void where passion used to live. That's when he walked in, not with a flourish, but with a calm certainty that parted the crowd. His name was Jake Sullivan. He was a freelance photographer, in town for a week on an architectural assignment. At 38, he had the easy confidence of a man who spent more time observing than being observed. His dark hair was streaked with premature grey at the temples, and his eyes, a startling shade of sea blue, scanned the room and landed on Sarah, not with a predatory gleam, but with a flicker of genuine, curious interest. He saw the woman in the green dress, not just the wife, the mother. He took the stool next to her. "You look like you're waiting for a verdict, not a drink," he said, his voice a low, warm rumble. Startled, Sarah met his gaze. The directness was unnerving. "Maybe I am," she heard herself say, a hint of a smile touching her lips. The verdict on whether this was a good idea. And was it? "Ask me in an hour." He laughed, a good, honest sound. He didn't buy her a drink. He asked her opinion on the local craft beer. They talked. It was a torrential downpour of conversation after an 11-year drought. They spoke of obscure documentaries, the feeling of holding a physical book, the melancholic beauty of empty city streets at dawn. He spoke of chasing light in Istanbul and the silence of the Utah deserts. She spoke of her work as a graphic designer, the creative spark she'd banked to embers for the sake of stability. She didn't mention Mark. He didn't ask. For those 2 hours, their pasts and futures were irrelevant. Only the electric, terrifying present existed. "I have a hotel room with a view of the city skyline," he said later, his voice casual but his eyes intense. "They say it's best right before sunrise." A photographer's secret. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. This was the line, drawn in the sand of the bar's polished floor. Crossing it meant stepping out of her life, if only for a few hours. She thought of Mark's gentle snore, of Chloe's stuffed rabbit waiting on her perfectly made bed. She thought of the endless stretch of identical, predictable days ahead. "Just to see the view?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Just the view," he promised. "We promise. One night. Just tonight." The promise hung between them, a flimsy shield against the undeniable pull. It made it feel manageable, forgivable. A single, contained anomaly in the graph of her life. His hotel room was as he described, all cool modern lines and a wall of windows showcasing the city as a constellation of diamonds on black velvet. They didn't turn on the main lights. The city's glow painted their skin in shades of silver and shadow. The promise of just the view evaporated with their first kiss. It was not a gentle meeting of lips but a collision of two starved souls. It was wrong. It was a betrayal so profound it felt like vertigo. And in that moment, wrapped in the anonymity of the high-rise, Sarah didn't care. For the first time in years, she felt utterly, terrifyingly alive. The hours melted. They were strangers, yet in the dark, they knew each other with a shocking, instinctual intimacy. They shared stories they'd buried, her childhood dreams of painting in Paris, his grief over a brother lost too young. He photographed her, not as a subject, but as a discovery, the city lights glittering in her wide, guilty, exhilarated eyes. As the first hint of pink tinged the horizon, they lay tangled in silence, the weight of reality crashing down. "We promised," Sarah said, her head on his chest listening to the steady beat of his heart, a rhythm already imprinted on her soul. "We did," Jake replied, his fingers stroking her hair. "One night." They parted at dawn without exchanging numbers. It was part of the pact, the final seal on their contained bubble of infidelity. Sarah slipped into her cold house, the smell of Jake still on her skin. She showered, scrubbing until her skin was raw, trying to erase the scent, the feeling, the memory. She climbed into bed beside Mark's sleeping form, a chasm of guilt wider than the ocean now between them. For a week, she functioned in a fog. She was the perfect mother, the attentive wife, overcompensating with pancakes and kisses, all while feeling like a ghost in her own home. Mark noticed her distance but attributed it to work stress. "You've been quiet, honey," he'd say, and she'd force a smile, dying inside. But the memory of Jake wasn't a ghost, it was a live wire. The feel of his hands, the sound of his laugh, the way he looked at her as if she were a masterpiece, not a checklist. The promise of one night began to feel like a life sentence to a lesser existence. Unbeknownst to her, Jake was in his own hell. Back in his loft in Chicago, every cityscape was dull, every face ordinary. He'd captured 1,000 sunsets, but none held the color of Sarah's eyes in the morning light. The disciplined photographer who lived for the next assignment was now haunted by a single, perfect frame. He had honored their promise, but his will was crumbling. It was Sarah who broke first. Driven by a desperation she could no longer contain, she fell back on her professional skills. Using the name of the hotel and the date, she found the website for the architectural firm that had commissioned the work. Scrolling through their vendor list, she found him, Jake Sullivan Photography. Her hand trembled as she navigated to his professional site. There, under a contact form, was a generic email. It wasn't personal, but it was a thread. She wrote and deleted a dozen messages. Finally, she sent something simple, terrified, and irrevocable. "The view from here is grey. The viewer misses the skyline. 3 agonizing days passed. Then, a reply appeared in her otherwise mundane inbox. No subject line, just a single sentence. "The skyline hasn't been the same since. It waits, Jay." And so began the digital affair. At first, it was just emails, long, lyrical, soul-bearing missives that turned her lunch breaks into stolen rendezvous and her late nights into secret writing sessions. Then came a dedicated, encrypted messaging app. Their words were a world they built together, a fortress of intimacy that excluded Mark completely. They shared photos. He sent her glimpses of his world, a coffee cup on his desk, a rainy street. She sent him the curve of her neck, her hand holding a leaf, always careful to keep her face, her full surroundings, out of frame. It was a new, more sustained betrayal. The physical affair had been a wildfire, intense and destructive. This was a slow, smoldering burn, consuming her from the inside out. Months bled into a year. The lie became a second skin. She celebrated her 12th wedding anniversary with Mark at a lovely restaurant, all while her phone burned a hole in her purse, a lifeline to Jake. She kissed her daughter goodnight, her heart splitting in two with a love that was pure and a guilt that was corrosive. The inevitable demand for more grew. "I need to hear your voice," Jake typed one night. The first phone call, made from her parked car in a grocery store lot, left her shaking and euphoric. His voice in her ear was both a balm and a poison. Then came the request that spelled the beginning of the end. "I have a job in Buffalo. It's a 4-hour drive from you. One more night, Sarah. Just one." To know it was real. The old promise was resurrected, a parody of their first. Just one night. She agreed, orchestrating a complex web of lies, a fictitious design conference, a helpful but non-existent friend needing support. Mark, ever trusting, kissed her goodbye and told her to have a productive trip. The hotel in Buffalo was a mid-tier chain, a far cry from the sleek high-rise of their first night. But when he opened the door, none of that mattered. The year of digital longing collapsed into a single, frantic embrace. This time, there was no pretense of watching the sunrise. This time, it was raw, hungry, and filled with the painful knowledge of time's tyranny. They had 24 hours. They mapped each other's bodies like explorers, trying to memorize the terrain for a lifetime of exile. In a lull, wrapped in the thin hotel sheets, Jake said the words that shattered the fragile equilibrium. "I can't do this anymore, Sarah. This, halfway, these stolen hours. Leave with me. Not for a night. For good." The air left the room. The fantasy had been a beautiful, airtight chamber, and he had just blown the hatch. Reality, cold and brutal, flooded in. "I have a daughter, Jake. Chloe. She's my entire world." "So build a new world," he pleaded, his blue eyes desperate. "One where you don't have to live a lie every single day. She deserves a happy mother, not a ghost." He was voicing her deepest, most shameful yearning, but he was also asking her to detonate her life. The image of Chloe's face, confused and heartbroken, was a shield her desire could not penetrate. "I can't," she whispered, tears streaming silently. "I made a promise to her long before I made one to you." The second morning after was a funeral. They dressed in silence. At the door, he cupped her face. "I love you, Sarah. That's my truth. I won't contact you again. This is killing me." He kissed her, a final, searing brand, and was gone. The drive home was a 4-hour penance. She cried until she was hollow. She walked back into her house, a shell of the woman who had left. Mark was in the kitchen, making Chloe a peanut butter sandwich. He took one look at her pale, devastated face and his own softened with concern. "Rough conference, honey? You look exhausted." That was the moment. The perfect, awful moment to confess, to let the truth spew out and let the chips fall where they may. She opened her mouth, the words a jagged lump in her throat. And then Chloe came skidding into the kitchen, a drawing in her hand. "Mummy, you're back. Look, I drew our family at the zoo. That's you, and Daddy, and me, and the silly monkey." The drawing was a vibrant, chaotic mess of love and crayon. Sarah looked at her daughter's beaming, trusting face, then at Mark's kind, oblivious eyes. The truth, in that moment, felt less like honesty and more like a nuclear bomb aimed at a preschooler's art project. She closed her mouth. She swallowed the confession, a bitter, permanent pill. "It was draining, sweetie," she said to Mark, her voice miraculously steady. She hugged Chloe fiercely, inhaling the scent of crayons and childhood. "But I'm so happy to be home." She chose her family, not out of a sudden rekindled passion for Mark, but out of a love for Chloe that was deeper than any ocean of desire, and out of a responsibility for the life she had built. She closed the encrypted app. She deleted the secret email account. She threw herself into motherhood and marriage with a grim, determined focus. She and Mark even started couples counseling, where she spoke of distance and communication issues, her great sin a boulder in her stomach she never disclosed. The guilt didn't leave. It became a tenant, living quietly in a spare room of her heart. Some nights, she'd wake up and reach for her phone, the instinct to text Jake, a muscle memory not yet faded. She'd see a photograph of a city skyline or smell a particular cologne, and the pain would be a fresh, sharp sting. She never heard from Jake again. He kept his final promise. But she often wondered, in her quietest moments, if he was somewhere, looking at a sunrise through a lens, remembering the woman in the green dress. She wondered if his one night had rewritten his story too, or if he had simply filed her away as a poignant, lost shot. Sarah learned a terrible, beautiful truth. Some loves are not meant to be foundations. They are seismic events. They reshape your inner landscape utterly, leaving canyons of regret and peaks of unparalleled feeling. But you cannot build a house on a fault line. The love with Jake was a wildfire. It cleared away the dead undergrowth of her complacency, forcing her to see the neglected acres of her own soul. The slow, careful work of replanting, of finding a new, more conscious kind of love with Mark, was her lifelong penance and her path forward. We promised it was just one night. A promise made to make the unforgivable feel temporary. But one night wasn't enough. It was enough, however, to change everything. It taught her that the most dangerous lies are not the ones we tell our partners, but the ones we tell ourselves about what we need, what we deserve, and what we can live without. And in the quiet, steadfast love of her family, a love she now worked every day to truly see and reciprocate, she found not the fiery passion of a single night, but the enduring warmth of a sunrise she had chosen, day after day after day.